Stress thrives in isolation. Relief comes through connection. Joy is through connection. So when in doubt, are you feeling connected to the workplace? Who do you feel connected to in the workplace? Because they are going to be a shortcut to joy for you.
That's Amy Leneker. Amy spent over a decade in the C-suite where she suffered from many stress-induced panic attacks. Having overcome these, she now helps professionals lead with less stress and more joy. And her latest work, Cheers to Monday, the surprisingly simple method to lead and live with less stress and more joy, does just that. So you'll learn 1, the top 5 barriers to joy at work, 2, the 3-step unstressing method, and 3, the simple practice that leads to more joy. And if you would like a summary write-up of the actionable wisdom that Amy shares, you can find that with the free Gold Nugget email newsletter. Sign up at awesomeatyourjob.com. I'm Pete Makaitis. This is How to Be Awesome at Your Job. And now, here's Amy. Amy, welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's great to see you.
Well, I'm excited to talk about Cheering Monday. And first, let's hear about your personal story. You mentioned you're a recovering workaholic, and you have, I don't know if it's a record, but a striking number of panic attacks that occurred in a 3-month window. Can you tell us a little bit about the story?
I did. And thank you for asking, because it was a horrible, horrible time of my life. I wish that I could say that my burnout story was because I had an epiphany and decided to do something different, but it wasn't. It was that my body just shut down. And it's what you said. So over the course of a summer and into the early fall, I had over 100 stress-induced panic attacks, and it was horrible, the most terrifying time of my life. And so through lots of work with my doctor and the medical support, I was able to heal from burnout, and definitely don't ever want to experience that again.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing. And just so we're clear, what exactly is a panic attack? And how does it feel as opposed to being kind of stressed out?
I am not a medical expert, so this is only from my own experience. So I'm sure that there is a valid medical definition of what one is. But for me, what happened was I thought I was having a heart attack. Everything I had read about a heart attack, I'm like, oh, this must be it. Because my heart was racing, I was sweating, I had tunnel vision. It was this moment of almost feeling like you're out of your body, watching yourself, but like not actually being yourself. So you're never going to wonder, am I having one, or is this just stress?
Yeah.
Because you'll know. It is not your everyday, I feel a little stressed out.
Okay. So can you take us into that world, that picture? So this comes from a great deal of stress. What kinds of stresses were you experiencing?
Looking back, I had been stressed for as long as I could remember. I had what I thought was my dream job. It was the job I had gone to college for, had gone into huge amounts of student loan debt in order to go to graduate school for. It was the job that I wanted. And looking back, I don't remember when high amounts of stress weren't part of my life. So at the time, we also had 2 little kids. So there was a lot of trying to figure out how to be a mom and how to work and be a mom at the same time of an incredibly demanding job. And on top of all of that, one of the saddest realizations for me was just how much of the stress was self-induced, how much of those expectations really came from myself, not always from the outside world. But it took me years of reflection to understand the role that I had played.
Can you give us an example of a self-induced expectation that's just not at all helpful?
Yeah, so here's a great one. I thought that I had cracked the code on work-life balance. So here's what I did. I was leading a large team at the time, huge performance measures, lots of stress, but I left work at a reasonable time. Every day. I very rarely stayed. I wasn't at the office till 9 or 10 o'clock at night person. So I thought, I've cracked the code. Because what I would do is I would get to work. I would work at the speed of light all day. I would leave at a decent time, and then I would be home for soccer and homework and baths and all the things. And then once the whole house shut down, that's when I would log on and do all of my email. That's when I would do all of my prep for the next day. So I'm working alone, just me and my Labradoodle, until 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, and then waking up the next day and doing it all over again. Week after week, month after month, year after year. thinking that I had cracked the code, thinking like, I figured this out. I figured out how to be a mom and a career person and not take away from the family. But what I was doing was completely negating myself. I had taken myself out of the equation.
I see. Okay. Well, that's a good little warning right there in terms of anyone is living just that. It's like, watch out.
Yes.
So thinking through your own lived experience and your research process for writing the book and working with clients, what's something that's really surprised you in terms of your discoveries about stress?
The first one would be that there isn't just one kind of work stress. There are 5. And I didn't know that. At the height of my burnout, I didn't understand that there were 5 kinds of work stress, because once you see that, you can't unsee it. Once you understand that there's actually 5 actionable types of stress, then you can look at solutions that really work. So that would probably be my number one. My second biggest aha was just how much of an intersection there is between stress and joy. We have got lots of great studies on stress at work. We've got fewer studies around joy at work. But what I couldn't find, what I didn't see, was a study about the intersection between the two. How does one impact the other? How does a lack of one impact the other? So that was my other biggest aha, was that there was this research gap that I wanted to fill. What is it that we could understand about how these two seemingly opposite forces can work together and be in support of each other?
Okay. Well, can you unpack a little bit of that dynamic between stress and joy for us?
Yes. So here's what I found. So we just did this national research study in 2026. So this is brand new data. And what we learned is that 79% of working Americans said, I need joy in order to do my best work. That's a lot, 79%. That number jumps to 89% for executives. What's fascinating to me then is when you look at the data, 75% of American workers say that feeling joy helps them cope with work stress. So these are not two independent forces. We spend so much time, especially since the pandemic, so much time talking about stress and burnout, but very little time. Very few organizations that I work with are having conversations around joy, even though it's part of the equation. People need it in order to do their best work. And 75% of people say, I need it in order to cope with work stress.
Well, joy is a good word and we dig it. And so I guess I've heard multiple definitions of joy. I'm thinking, partially in a Catholic theological context. You could talk about the virtue of joy, but how are you defining it here?
Here's how I define it. So in our research, we found that there were 3 key drivers of joy. So the way I define joy is the feeling you're experiencing when you have these 3 key drivers. So the first one is when there's meaning and purpose in your work. The second is when there is mattering in your relationships. So if you and I are on the same team, I matter to you, not just because of the work that I do, not just because I meet my deadlines, but I matter to you because who I am as a person. And when I did this study, I thought those first 2 would show up. Meaning made sense to me, mattering made sense to me. The third one was a surprise. I was not expecting the third key driver of joy at work, which was momentum. When I feel that I am making some type of progress, when I can look back and say, things are different because I was here. Those were the 3 key drivers. So when you have just one of them, you can experience joy. So if you think about a moment, I hope you've had one, I bet you've had hundreds, a moment with a coworker where you shared a joke, where you laughed, or you went and had coffee. You can have joy just from one of those 3. But when you have 2 or when you have all 3, then you've set yourself up for a perfect storm in the best way for the conditions for joy.
Okay. So then in this definition, that would be distinct from, say, pleasure. Like I had a really tasty lunch or I was playing a really fun game.
Yes.
That's a different thing here.
It is a different thing. And it's different than happiness too. And so what I often tell leaders and teams is the words are important. Words matter. Definitions matter. And not to get too lost in the semantics. So what I don't want to do is to go into an organization where they spend the next 6 hours trying to figure out the difference between happy and joy. So
sure.
that's probably not going to be a great ROI for bringing in a consultant for 6 hours. But what I want to do with them is I want them to really evaluate those 3 key drivers. Are they experiencing those? Are they helping to create those for other people? And just as importantly, do they understand the biggest barriers to joy? Because in the majority of teams that I work with, they are completely unaware that they are inadvertently blocking joy for themselves and for everybody around them.
Interesting. Well, could you share a story along those lines?
Absolutely. So here's a great one. The 5th one. So if you look at the top 5, we found 12, but if you just look at the top 5, the 5th leading barrier to joy was when there's isolation or disconnection. So if in the workplace you feel apart from or separate from, that is a barrier to joy. And yet in a lot of teams I work with, they don't really want to talk about whether or not they're connected as a team. They don't really want to talk about whether or not someone feels isolated on their team. But we have to, because what we know is that when you're in emotional pain, like this driver or this barrier to joy, that the part of your brain that lights up is the exact same part that lights up when you're in physical pain. So when people describe a really hard work situation, they might say things like, this really is painful, or I'm not sure I can take it, because their brain is processing that pain in the same place. So if we can understand not just what drives it, but if we understand actually what gets in the way of it, we have a much better chance at creating a culture. Can I share the number 1 barrier to joy?
Yes, please.
So the number 1 was an overwhelming workload. So when leaders say, I don't know where to start, I don't know where to begin, or if an individual contributor will say, gosh, I just wish I had more joy, what I can say is start with the number 1 barrier. If you don't know where to begin, let's look at the number 1 barrier. What is your workload? Do you have a workload that feels sustainable? Because at least we know we can go in with the highest priority and hopefully create some shifts on the margin.
Okay. And so what's the 2, 3, and 4?
Yeah, let's fill in the middle because we've got the 2 bookends. So the 4th one is when you have technology problems that disrupt your day. The 3rd, isn't that funny?
Oh, that actually makes me feel better. It's like, I am not just an impatient jerk. This is a universal human condition.
Yeah. I do a conference every year with the CIOs in Washington State. And so when this came up in the data, I went back to the research team and I'm like, we got to be really certain that this is there because I'm about to tell a conference full of CIOs that they're
You're killing everybody's joy. It's all your fault. Yeah.
The 3rd leading barrier is when there is sudden change without an explanation. And the 2nd was feeling underappreciated. When I work with leaders and teams, I do an exercise where after I share with them that the 2nd leading barrier to joy is feeling underappreciated, I have them take 2 minutes and appreciate someone at their workplace. Send an email, send a text message, whatever it is, it just has to be true appreciation because we all have the ability to do something in less than 2 minutes about the 2nd leading barrier to joy.
Yes. Well, that's really helpful to have that rundown. And I guess I'm thinking a sudden change without explanation. I mean, you did the research, so you tell me this is accurate. For me, at least, I'm thinking sudden change without acceptable explanation. Because sometimes like there's a sudden change and the explanation is just like, oh, so-and-so wants it this way now. I was like, well, why didn't so-and-so mention that a month ago when we were starting doing this thing?
Yeah.
Or so-and-so prefers it to be in a different color or whatever. It's sort of like, in a way, it's almost interrelated to feeling underappreciated. I feel yanked around and disrespected. It's like, oh, I guess you gave no thought whatsoever to me, the human being who had to execute this thing. Not a great feeling.
I think you're spot on. And I think what you're describing is backed up not just by research, but what I'm seeing anecdotally in organizations, which is that younger generations have an even stronger desire for the why. That's what I see. When I go into organizations, younger generations are not tolerating this idea of just do this because we said so. There's really this deeper need to understand, well, why is that? So I think you're spot on that sometimes it's not just hearing the change, It's, do I understand the why behind the change?
Okay. And so then if we need joy to do our best work and joy helps with work stress, is it also true that, I guess that would be the dynamic, is that joy helps with stress and stress impedes joy? And so you've identified some barriers. I guess I'd love to know, what are some of the top things that make a world of difference rather quickly in this equation?
It's a great question, because I think the most important thing that we can do, regardless of where you sit in an organization, is to look at the three drivers. So we know that meaning, mattering, momentum, that's what fosters joy. So are you tuned in to each of those three? Do you have those three? And unfortunately, there are times where someone will say no. So here's an example. We had talked earlier about the 5 kinds of work stress. And one type of work stress is called system stress. It's when the very system that you're a part of makes it hard for you to be successful. Things like inequity, unfairness. When you're in a toxic work environment, and I hope you're not, I hope you never find yourself in one, but if you are in a toxic work environment, the ability to feel joy is pretty small. So recognizing that sometimes this isn't just a personal issue. This isn't just, I need to be more resilient. I need to figure out how to manage my stress better. It's actually understanding, am I in a workplace with system stress that is actually preventing me from doing that?
Okay. So we recognize it. And then hopefully if you do, you try to get out of there, I guess is what you do. Well, let's hear these 5. So we got system. What are the other 4?
The first type of work stress is schedule. It's when there is just not enough time in the day to do everything that you need to do. Even if you work through breaks or lunch or you skip a vacation, there just isn't enough time. You'll also see schedule stress when folks are just booked back to back to back all day long. That is schedule stress. The second type is suspense. When you are waiting for information or you're waiting for a decision, and while you're waiting, that ambiguity, that uncertainty causes stress. The third type is social, and this is the stress of people. In an ideal world, the people that you work with help you do your job. They make your work enjoyable, but that isn't always the case. So the third type is when the relationships at work are making it harder for you. And then the fourth one is sudden. Sudden stress is when something happens out of the ordinary, something unusual, and it requires you to do something. You've got to think about something or make a decision, or that last minute fire that you're putting out. That is sudden stress.
Mm-hmm. I'm also curious to get your take on, I don't know if I would just call it biological stuff, but my stress joy situation is largely impacted by, have I slept enough? Have I exercised? Have I eaten enough and not junk in recent times? How do you think about these in the domain of stress and joy?
It's a huge component of it. So what I think we've done that has done a tremendous disservice to employees and to entire organizations is that we have ended up in a place where you've got one who blames the other. So what I see is organizations blame employees for everything you just said. You're not sleeping well enough. You're not eating well enough. You're not taking breaks you're not taking breaks and walks and all the things. And then you have employees blaming organizations saying, my workload's too high. I can't be successful here. So the only way this works is when everybody understands the role that they play. So yes, individuals have a role. Yes, leaders have a role and organizations have a role. Where I think we have really missed the boat is that we have turned this into a shame, blame, finger pointing game, rather than coming together and saying, if our goal is to really have a healthy workplace that thrives, what does that look like? And what is everybody responsible for in order to make that happen? So long answer to your question, yes, absolutely those things matter. And they're not enough. So in our research, 25%, this blows my mind every time I say it out loud, 25% of working Americans report feeling bullied at least once a week. And many reported feeling bullied more than once a week. So if that is your experience, if you're going to work every week feeling bullied, how much sleep would it take to get over that? How many walking breaks do you need to get over that? So that's where the shame and blame comes in. And I see this all the time because we do workshops on stress. We do workshops on burnout. But if I go into an organization with system stress, how helpful is my training? I can tell you all the barriers to joy, but if you're feeling bullied at work, that resolve is not going to come from you alone. That requires a change outside of just you.
And that is striking, 25% bullied weekly.
Isn't it? It's heartbreaking.
What are common examples of workplace bullying that are very prevalent?
So in our research, we were clear not to define it because what was important to us was to understand if people felt bullied using their definition. So I think it varies depending on where you work. I think it varies depending on the level of organization you're in. I think the important thing is that do you know what that is where you are? Do you know what's okay and what's not okay in your workplace? Do you know what to do if you're feeling bullied and what happens? So I think that's the key piece is what do you do? How do you tap into those resources if you believe that's what's happening for you?
I suppose what I'm driving at is if someone might be minimizing an incidence of bullying, like, oh, it's kind of annoying. Yeah, I kind of don't care for it. As opposed to like, well, no, actually, that is straight up hostile, toxic, unacceptable stuff. Could you give us some examples of things that maybe get minimized yet are very common and deeply problematic?
Sure. I am a certified mediator. I specialize in workplace conflict. I have over 10,000 hours of mediation hours. And what I see in those mediations is exactly what you just described. That very often one person will say, I didn't even know this was a big deal. And the other person says, this is causing me so much pain and strain that I've now brought in a third-party mediator to help us get through it. I just did a mediation recently where, you cannot make this up. It was a comment, a misunderstood comment 6 months ago that had created so much tension and conflict on this team. So rather than those two being able to talk about, what did you mean by that comment? What was your intent in that? It created 6 months of conflict. So a lot of it comes down to communication. I see a lot of it around when people believe they're being treated unfairly. So at work, they're experiencing that how other people are being treated doesn't reflect how I'm being treated, or even that they believe other people are being treated unfairly. I see that as one. If I had to name a third one, I think it would probably be around this idea of what is a respectful workplace. And when you've got different ideas, different generations, different cultures of what respect looks like. So a great example, I just did a mediation with a team because there was a whole team that was not getting along. And they were frustrated because they would share ideas and they believed that the manager wasn't hearing them. And they were calling it hostile. They were using these words that create a red flag in my head as a mediator. And what the leader said was, I do hear your ideas. I'm just not taking them. So now we've got a different conversation to have. It's not about whether or not they're hearing you. It's whether or not they're taking the idea. So if I had to sum it up into one, communication would be the one that I see most often in my workplace mediations.
Okay. Well, so you've got an ABC of Joy method. Can you share this with us?
Sure. It is so simple. And I share it with leaders and teams all the time. So the first one is just to be aware of it. So to actually start being aware of, am I experiencing joy or am I not? To not let joy be accidental, because joy is really different than toxic positivity. This is not about forcing joy on people. This isn't about forcing people to feel positive. So just that first moment of, am I aware of just how much joy impacts my world of work and how much it ripples to my world outside of work? The B, and it almost sounds silly, but the B is actually breath. It is that so many of us move through the workday in a complete state of stress that we are breathing from our chest and not actually from our belly. And when I'm doing mediations or when I'm doing tough conversations, I always watch how people are breathing. Because if they're breathing up here, that's the breath of stress. And so are we able to get that into our diaphragmatic breathing to make that shift? And then the C is connection. Stress thrives in isolation. Relief comes through connection. Joy is through connection. So when in doubt, are you feeling connected to the workplace? Who do you feel connected to in the workplace? Because they are going to be a shortcut to joy for you.
Mm-hmm. And in your appendix, you've got the unstressing method. Are those the ABCs or got more for us?
No, the unstressing method is different. So it's actually what I'm most excited to share with everyone. I often joke, I went on a work trip recently and I shared it with the barista at the airport, with the rideshare driver, and then with the person checking me at the hotel. Because when I say, how are you? If someone says, oh, to be honest, I'm really stressed. I'm like, well, I got something for you. So really simple, 3 steps. Step number 1, you've got to see your stress differently. So you've got to get all your stressors from your head, from your heart onto paper. And it works best if you can use sticky notes. You don't have to, but it works best if you can put 1 stressor per sticky note. Then you see your stress through the lens of, is this important to me? And do I have control over it? And how you answer those questions, then you place your stressor on the unstressing matrix, because there's 4 quadrants. So based on how you answer, is it important? Do I have control? You place it on the matrix. Step 2 is we sort it. And you sort your stress into those 5 categories that you and I talked about just a few minutes ago. Which type of stress is it? And sometimes it's more than 1 type. Sometimes it's all 5 types, but you write down on those numbers 1 through 5, which type of stress it is. And what I love about step 2 is you've got this really quick visual of what's actually happening for me right now. If you look and there's a whole lot of 3s, you've got some work to do with the people that you're working with. If you look at your matrix and you've got lots of 5s, that's a red flag that you're feeling system stress. So it gives you this really quick snapshot into what's been happening behind the scenes. So then in step 3, we solve it. Because wherever your stressor landed on that matrix, there is a next guiding step for you to take. So you don't have to feel stuck. You don't have to feel like you're in analysis paralysis. There is a next guiding thing for you to do wherever that landed.
Okay. Well, so I'd love to work through something here. Let's say right now I am stressed by the war in Iran.
Yes.
That was sudden. I was not expecting that. That just sort of appeared. It is suspenseful. It's like, what the heck is going to happen? It feels unfair. You point the blame anywhere you want, but it seems like at least one person did something that wasn't cool.
Yes.
And so now it's completely out of my control. It's important to me, although not super immediately, directly, personally, but just in terms of like the well-being and flourishing of humanity. And I don't know, are my children going to go to war in years to come? So there's that suspense thing. So, okay, let's say I have that on Post-it. I've put it in the right quadrant. I've labeled some of those S category types. Well, now what the heck do I do?
The action there is about asking for support that you need, because you don't have control over it. My guess is that you don't know anyone directly that has control over it. Is that a fair assumption? So then
I'm not that powerful. No,
right? Not that powerful. And this example that you gave, I'm hearing it in every workshop that I'm in. Right before this podcast with you, I did a workshop this morning. People are talking about it. This is a huge part of our lives that is completely out of our control and feels wildly important. So that's quadrant 1. So in quadrant 1, it's about asking for the support that you need. How do I manage this thing that I have no control over? How am I going to be able to still move forward? How can I still function and be able to do what I need to do while this stressor is here? And while it's here for a length of time that we're not sure of, we don't know the consequences of it. So the important thing about understanding when something is in quadrant 1 is that it frees you up from, there isn't an action, a direct action that I need to take. But is there something? Then you can start to, so what happened just this morning in the workshop was someone said, well, but I can write a letter. I can send an email. Like, okay, yes. So then you can start to think about, are there actions connected to it, even if it's not directly I mean, at least no one I work with has the power to put an end to the stressor. But what are those things that are within our control? So I'm glad you brought up that example. It just came up this morning.
So then for asking for support, I suppose some of that support is just kind of me doing things that are helpful for me. But then what is useful support you and I and our pals can offer to each other in a world where we don't have the control?
I think there is support that we can offer each other through connection. So just by recognizing what you're going through. And I think sometimes the support needs to come from a professional. You may have really well-intentioned friends, but they may or may not be mental health experts. So part of quadrant 1 is recognizing, do I need someone who is a professional at this? Just because you love someone or just because they love you doesn't necessarily mean that they're trained to provide support to you on a stressor that's wildly important to you and outside of your control. So sometimes that support can come from family or friends or community, and other times it may need to come from someone who's actually trained in how to do it.
Yeah, I like that a lot because a therapist or a professional can really get to some custom stuff there in terms, because like it could be stressing you in completely different ways than it's stressing me.
Exactly.
Like maybe one person is ruminating, another feels betrayed, lied to. They don't feel that they can trust anyone anymore. And it's just like this other time in life. It's bringing back traumatic memories.
Yes.
Others could be binge watching the news to the detriment of their responsibilities. And so there's different kinds of interventions that happen there. So I like that a lot in terms of support. Can take a lot of different varieties, but it's the thing to do when it's important but out of your control.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, I work with a lot of leaders. I work with public sector leaders, Fortune 100 leaders. I work with leaders across industries. The most successful leaders I work with, they have coaches, they have therapists, and most of them have both. So, I mean, most really successful leaders know that I have got to surround myself with the support that I need to be successful. And the really good ones have gotten really good at figuring out what that support looks like.
Yeah. All right. Well, Amy, tell me anything else you want to make sure to mention before we hear about some of your favorite things.
Here's what I would offer. That if you're listening to this and you are feeling wild amounts of work stress, to know that you are not alone. Over 80% of people are right there with you. If you're listening to this and you're not feeling that way, then I hope that you can go back into work tomorrow with some empathy for people who might be, because we are not all having the same experience at the same time. So that's what I would love to leave before we jump into the next part.
Big thanks to Amy for sharing her wisdom with us. And big thanks to our sponsors. Check them out. One sponsor to check out is Monarch. I don't enjoy thinking about or fiddling with money, so I love resources that make this quicker and easier. Set yourself up for financial success this year. Monarch is a gorgeous personal finance tool that makes your money life easier. It brings your whole money picture from budgets to accounts and transactions and investments into one super handy dashboard on your phone or laptop. I was such a fan of the old Mint.com and was super bummed when it disappeared. But the good news is that Monarch was founded by a team that includes the original product manager of Mint, and I dare say it's even better. I like the graphical summaries that help me drill down into things quickly and easily, and helps me get to the bottom of anything that just seems off or weird, or helps me zero in on great opportunities for savings faster. In fact, Monarch helped the average user save over $200 per month after joining. So set yourself up for financial success in 2026 with Monarch, the all-in-one tool that makes proactive money management simple all year long. Use code AWESOME at monarch.com for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarch.com with code AWESOME. One sponsor to check out is Gusto. I love workdays full of creative collaborations and delighting people. I don't love workdays full of paperwork, forms, and compliance-y tasks. That's why I'm such a fan of Gusto. When I talk to my accountant about how to handle payroll stuff, he says Gusto. When I talk to executive director of a small nonprofit how they handle compliance-y stuff, she says Gusto. When I'm getting paid by a bigger organization, I love it when they tell me they use Gusto. Gusto is an online payroll and benefits software built for small businesses. It's all-in-one, remote-friendly, and incredibly easy to use. So you can pay, hire, onboard, and support your team from anywhere. Gusto enables automatic payroll tax filing, simple direct deposits, health benefits, commuter benefits, workers' comp, 401k, and so much more. Gusto makes it simple with options for every budget. Try Gusto today at gusto.com/awesome and get 3 months free when you run your first payroll. That's 3 months of free payroll at gusto.com/awesome. One sponsored checkout is Shopify. When you're starting something new, what ifs abound. What if I fail? What if nobody cares? What if nobody buys my stuff? Shopify can help make things easy. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S., from household names like Magic Spoon and Allbirds to brands just getting started. Shopify facilitates everything from inventory to payments to analytics and more. No need to use a dozen different software tools. Everything's all in one place, making your life easier and your operations smoother. And what if you get stuck? Well, Shopify is always around to share advice with their award-winning 24/7 customer support. You can get started with your own design studio with hundreds of ready-to-use templates. Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store that matches your brand style. It's time to turn those what-ifs into ka-ching with Shopify today. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/awesome. Go to shopify.com/awesome. That's shopify.com/awesome. Ka-ching. Okay. Well, now could you share a favorite quote, something you find inspiring?
Anne Lamott says that lighthouses don't go running all over an island looking for boats to save. They just stand there shining. And I think that is such a beautiful metaphor for stress, that we don't have to go running all over our workplaces looking for people to save, looking for stress to eliminate, that if we can take really good care of ourselves, that very notion of standing like a lighthouse in our own wellness has a ripple effect on everybody.
Okay. And a favorite book?
I'm going to go with Dare to Lead. When I read Dare to Lead by Brené Brown, it felt like these pieces of the leadership puzzle that I had been missing fell into place. And I was so inspired by that book that I ended up getting trained by her and certified by her to bring Dare to Lead into organizations to help people be courageous. So that book, it changed my life. And that's not hyperbole to say that. It literally changed my life.
All right. And a favorite tool?
Is a confetti cannon a tool?
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Because I keep this puppy on my desk because you never know when a confetti moment is going to hit. So I think this is my favorite tool, that when there's a celebration, I always try to have a confetti cannon not too far away.
Now, are confetti cannons, I've never owned one or interacted with one personally. Are they refillable, reusable?
This one is not. There probably are. I bet there are some environmentally safe ones that are.
Mm-hmm.
This one isn't. This is so cute. I just realized while I was on the call with you, my daughter wrote "Cheers to Monday." Can you see that?
Oh, that's sweet.
It's so cute because I sent 2 of these off this week with the book launch. So she was really sweet and cleaned the office and then put this. That's so darling. Super cute.
You know, it's 1,140 some interviews. I've asked people about their favorite tool, and this is the first time confetti cannon has appeared. And it's so good.
I love it. Let's name the episode that.
And a favorite habit?
Whenever I am driving in my car, I call my parents. And it just is such a great way to connect with 2 people that I love more than anything else in the world.
Is there a key nugget you share that really seems to connect and resonate with folks? They quote it back to you often?
What I'm hearing back most often now is what I shared with you right at the end about stress, thriving, and isolation. That many times after I give this talk, people will come up and sometimes they're even crying, saying that they didn't realize that they had been disconnecting from people that they loved. They had been isolating from people that they cared about. And so unfortunately, stress just takes on this spiral. So that's what I'm hearing right now. A lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And if folks want to learn more, get in touch, where'd you point them?
Oh, thank you. I love that question. AmyLeneker.com is the best way. And I'm also on all the socials and I would love to connect. So reach out. I'd love to stay connected.
All right. And do you have a final challenge or call to action for folks looking to be awesome at their jobs?
My call to action would be to use the stress ruler today. On a scale of 0 to 10, how challenging has your stress been? Ask the people you love that same question and then do something about it.
All right. Amy, thank you.
Thank you. This was so fun. I loved being here.
I really appreciate Amy's take on focusing on connection, because often when we're stressed and busy, it seems like we have the least availability and maybe interest in doing socializing, friendship, connection stuff. I just got to hunker down and get through this. And yet that's exactly what's necessary. A handy reminder from Amy, if you want to check out the show notes or the transcript or the links to items that we've referenced, please pay us a visit at awesomeatyourjob.com/EP1142. Hope to catch you next time, and peace.